Welcome, everyone. My name is Candace Black, and I am happy to welcome you to the Supporting Students Through the Culminating Project webinar offered by myself and my colleague, Maria Fenton. As mentioned, my name is Candace Black, and I am your World Language Associate in the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages at NYSSB. I also want to introduce my co-presenter, Maria Fenton, who is a resource specialist and an expert in all things world language and the Seal of Biliteracy from the Mid-State Regional Bilingual Education Resource Network. You'll notice on the left here that we have a badge, a digital badge that you will earn after attending this webinar. That is in addition to the certificate that you'll get documenting your attendance. Now, all of the materials that we're going to be discussing today can be found in the handouts folder that we're showing you here on this screen, either through the QR code or the short URL. You'll also receive a follow-up email from me with a link to this folder. All of the materials that we're also showing you can be accessed on our website. Here's a picture of it so you know when you get there, and you can access this via the QR code, via the link, or you can do what I do and simply Google the terms NYSSB and NYSSB, or the acronym we use for the seal, and it should be your first hit. So since we have a large number of people attending this webinar today, we'd like to facilitate the submission of questions via a Google Doc. The link for this you can see right on the screen, and it has been entered into the chat. Please enter your questions on a separate line, and we will answer them in the order they are received. If time permits and we've answered all the questions, you might have the opportunity to unmute yourself or to enter a question into the chat. So let's review the goals for today's session. By the end of this session, you'll be able to explain the general timeline for the project, identify the major elements of the project, as well as describe the major duties of the project advisor and how the presentations are conducted, including expectations for student performance. We'll cover strategies to help students prepare for and conduct the presentation, as well as identify supports that students can use during their presentations. You'll know where to find the Culminating Project rubrics for each type of language, as well as to identify the expectations for the panel interviews that follow the student presentation. Finally, you'll be able to identify and find resources that are provided by our office for the project, and you'll know how to seek support from your local ARBN for the Seal of Biliteracy. Now, we want to give you a disclaimer here. For the purposes of this webinar, we will be discussing the Culminating Project and presentation in world languages, that is, other than English. However, the information that we present does apply to the project in English as well. So let's begin with the first question. Are SEAL earners required to complete a Culminating Project? So while the criteria that we offer for the SEAL provides multiple pathways, students are not required to complete a Culminating Project to earn the SEAL, provided that they can still earn their 3 points in English and 3 points in one or more world languages. We find, though, that this is a very popular option. So let's take a look at some statistics. More than 75% of all SEAL candidates complete a Culminating Project in English. As of last year, it was 78%. More than 95% of SEAL candidates complete a Culminating Project in a world language. Last year, it was 97%. So why do so many students choose to complete a project as 2 points towards the Seal of Biliteracy? Well, because they need 3 points in each language in order to earn the seal. The Culminating Project is available in both English and world languages, and it's the only criteria that is worth 2 points. So let's talk a little bit about the most common timeline for the Culminating Project. So in general, in the fall, this is when schools are raising awareness about the seal. And then in about December, they identify their eligible seniors and encourage them to pursue the seal. At the same time, they're identifying potential project advisors based on the language of those eligible seniors. And then in January, SEAL candidates are identified and their individual pathways, or how their points are going to be earned, are planned out. Those students who either wish or need to complete a Culminating Project in English and/or a world language are matched with the project advisor found in the previous month. Now, over the winter, students will begin working on their projects, identifying their topic, gathering resources, and meeting with their project advisor while they draft their culminating projects. In March, the SEAL coordinator will schedule the project presentations based on the availability of the panelists who will evaluate them. If the school was selected for a visit during the culminating project, and you would know if you had been selected because you would have been notified in September, then they will also submit the culminating project notification form no later than 4 weeks prior to the first student presentation. Again, you would know if you had been selected. This is just a reminder for those very few schools who were selected back in September. And then in April through June, students present their culminating projects to the panel of reviewers, and panelists determine what the student's proficiency is, and then the SEAL coordinator communicates the results to the students. Now, I want to point out that students may work on and complete their culminating project at any time during high school. There's nothing that says that this must be done during senior year. And actually, to divide the workload between English and a world language, we encourage schools to encourage students to complete their SEAL work, including the culminating project, in their best language, whatever that is, prior to senior year, so that senior year can focus solely on the next best language. If your student is a fluent speaker of the language, you could even have them complete part of their SEAL project as a freshman in 9th grade. It's all about when the student can demonstrate the proficiency. So let's talk about the major elements of the culminating project. We have the written portion, the oral and signed presentation or signed, and the oral or signed interview. Those are the 3 main parts. Then they may look differently from student to student, but they all are an important part of the project. So let's talk a little bit about how students choose their topic. Well, we really encourage schools to allow students to have a significant amount of leeway in choosing the topic of their culminating project, because this maximizes student engagement as well as the motivation necessary to reach completion of the project. We also like to see these projects embedded whenever possible into an existing class, because this allows the teacher to serve as the project advisor, and this gives the student regular support and guidance through the entire project process. Now, if you embed this project into a course, the teacher may then offer some guidelines as to the choice of topic. You may designate, for instance, a particular unit within the year in which students complete a culminating project and that they would then use for the Seal of Biliteracy. So the project itself is a research project. It can be formal or informal, and it should be on a topic of interest to the student. So essentially, the student will write some type of written part of the project. This might take the form of an essay, a paper, a summary, or a reflection of their research, and it's done in the target language. This is evaluated as presentational writing using the presentational part of the rubric. The student then presents, either orally or signed, their project in a monologue in the target language. This is treated as presentational speaking and uses the corresponding presentational rubric. The panel then interviews the student in the target language about their presentation, and this is the student's interpersonal communication, again, that it's evaluated using the interpersonal rubric. So long as there is a written portion of the project, regardless of the form it takes, whether it's an essay or a reflection, the student can then present the project, and the project can take any format. Now, the most traditional format is the one that I talked to you about, where the student wrote an essay after doing some research. They made up a PowerPoint presentation based on that research, and then they presented it orally to the panel and were interviewed afterwards. But we encourage you to allow students flexibility in the format that will work best for them. We have had a limited number of students present their own artwork or a performance piece that they did in the target language, and that was their project. They still have to do a written portion. Sometimes that's, again, a reflection, and they still have to present the project orally or signed. It can also take the form of a video, of a multimedia piece, journal, portfolios, many different options open to your students. And students can use any prior work that was exclusively their own. Now, we say this especially for our English dominant students. They will have completed English projects from 9th grade on, and many, if not most of them, will already have the required level of proficiency in 9th grade, if that is their native language, and could use a project that they did in, say, English 9. As long as it's their own project and not a group project, they can in fact use that project as their culminating project in whatever language it was done. Now, they still have to present that project and they still have to be interviewed in the corresponding language, but they can use prior work. Now, why are we recommending and focusing on the culminating project being embedded into an existing class? Well, we find myriad benefits to doing this. Number one, it provides the maximum amount of ongoing support for the student. The teacher has regular, daily, or every other day access to the student to help them along. It allows the classroom teacher to also serve as the project advisor to, again, monitor student progress over time. It also reduces the amount of extra work for the seal on the parts of both the advisor and the student because the project is a part of the normal work for the course and not something extra. So, what are some ideas for a culminating project? So, we put together some ideas that we'll show you briefly here. Students might do a portrait of an artist from a country, and we give you examples, as you can see, coming off of each of our shapes. Students could do an environmental issue, such as the destruction of the Amazon rainforest in Portuguese. They could use a cultural product or practice, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but the Schultüte is the German school cone that students get at the beginning of the year. They could talk about a historical or influential figure from the target culture, like the portrait of a Roman statesman. They could talk about a human rights issue, such as Malala's advocacy for girls' rights to an education. And they could also talk about a virtual visit to a location in a target country, such as students exploring the terracotta warriors from China. Of course, they can also do a current event relating to the target culture, and these are just some ideas of projects that we've learned about from schools. Please don't limit yourself to just these. We often get the question, is there a required length of time for the presentation of the culminating project or interview? And we want to state very clearly that while there's no required length, both the student's presentation and the interview have to be long enough for the panel to gather enough evidence to justify whatever proficiency level they assign the student. And so this means there's going to be some variability. We have gathered from multiple schools who have successful SEAL programs that student presentations of about 3 to 5 minutes and interviews that follow of the same length are generally sufficient to gather the evidence necessary. So you can use that as a guideline, but again, don't let that limit you. It's important that students know what to expect for the culminating project. So you're going to want to make sure you cover with them the room in which they'll present. And it's helpful to perhaps gather your SEAL coordinate or SEAL candidates one day and bring them into that room. Make sure they know what technology will be available for them to use. Students love to have a little clicker in their hand. It's actually something that's very common and helps them focus. Let them know who will be present on that day and how long they will be expected to present. You should let them know that the presentation and interview will be exclusively done in the target language. Now, obviously, if there's a fire drill, you're going to probably revert to the language of the school to get the students safely out. But other than that, the presentation, which is a monologue by the student, should be entirely in the target language, as should the interview. Let them know about how long you expect the interview to last. And it's really important that results will not be released on the presentation day. So tell that to students ahead of time, that you're going to get all of the student presentations or maybe all the presentations in one language done, and that you as a SEAL coordinator will release them at some point afterwards. And we certainly don't want those results released immediately prior to the student leaving. That doesn't allow the committee to discuss without the student being present, and obviously could create some situations you want to avoid. So let's talk about the Culminating Project Advisor and the role of this advisor. So each student that completes a culminating project should be assigned an advisor. And this person their job is to support the student through the project development process. Now, if the student's enrolled in a language course, such as ELA, ENL, or World Language, the project advisor is often the classroom teacher. But other qualified adults in the school community can also serve in this role. And we encourage you to think about this, especially for your English presentations. Administrators, other faculty members, social studies teachers, science teachers, school counselors, staff members, Board of Ed members, as well as community-based organization members. All of these people are eligible to serve as project advisors. Now, it's very helpful for the project advisor to speak the language of the project. Obviously, you can provide a lot richer feedback, especially on the language. However, it is not a requirement, because we do realize that some languages is very difficult to find a speaker of the language who can be accessible to the student throughout the year. So project advisors do not need to speak the language of the presentation. The project advisor helps the student choose a topic for their project, helps them select a project format, and helps them identify sources of authentic resources upon which they can base their research. They might help the student develop an outline. They're going to monitor the student's progress over the course of the semester or year, and they may choose to keep a progress log. They'll help students stay on target and provide feedback on early drafts of both the written portion and the presentation. They're also very helpful in giving students pointers on effective presentation techniques, whether that means monitoring ums and ahs, having good eye contact, good posture, things like that. Now, keep in mind that the only thing we're assessing at this point is the proficiency in the language, but nonetheless, the advisor can help in giving those pointers. Most of all, we want the project advisor to help build the students' confidence in their presentation skills for this project. Let's talk a little bit about what the role of the project advisor is not. The project advisor should not make decisions that are to be made by the student, such as the final choice of topic. They shouldn't provide the authentic resources, such as articles that the student will use, and they shouldn't be correcting the student's writing, whether it's grammar, vocabulary, revision. Now, that doesn't mean that if the student comes with a question and say, I'm not sure this is worded properly, that the advisor couldn't offer some suggestion, but they aren't going through the, say, written portion or the PowerPoint and correcting things for the student. So we often get the question, can the project advisor serve as a panelist to evaluate the project? Now, the project advisor, if they speak the language of the project, they may also serve as one of the panelists. This is also the case for a classroom teacher. Even though they are the classroom teacher, they may serve as a panelist so long as they speak the language. However, if the project advisor doesn't speak the language, they cannot serve as a panelist. That's true for anyone. So let's move on to some supports that students can use during their presentation. The students may use brief note cards during their presentation. These can contain words, key phrases, phonemic transcriptions of difficult words, like something written out phonetically. They might have drawings just to help students with what they want to say. But they should not contain complete sentences, because the temptation is for the student to read, and it's very important students know that the presentation is not a test of oral reading. It's a test of spontaneous, although practiced, presentation skills. If the student is going to use note cards, it's important for the SEAL coordinator to look them over prior to the student's presentation. Now, during the presentation, students can use certain supports. Now, it's recommended that students consider using a visual aid for the oral or signed presentation of the project to assist them in spontaneously speaking about their project. The visual aid could be a slide deck, and that's very often what it is. It provides students with a roadmap, and it really acts as almost a security blanket to help them through and remind them of the key phrases and things that they want to be able to say. So we encourage those key phrases, those words, images even, to help them speak spontaneously about the topic. Effective visual aids will contain a very limited amount of words or phrases to provide just enough information to get students to speak spontaneously about the topic. They should only contain words in the target language, except where it's necessary, such as for the use of proper names or a quote. They should contain visuals, could be photos, clip art, graphs, map, that help illustrate or reinforce what the student is saying. Effective visual aids should not contain text in anything but the target language, and they definitely, as stated before, should not contain complete sentences. Again, presentational speaking is not oral reading, and there's just a significant temptation when things are written out for the student to revert to simply reading off the slide. Now, students can also support each other through this process. Peers can review the written portion of the project and provide feedback. They can also provide feedback on practice presentations, things like volume of voice, clarity of speech. Is the student comprehensible? How is their posture, their gestures, and their mannerisms? Peers can also ask sample questions spontaneously to practice that interview. And as peers and colleagues, students can share with each other strategies they use to cope with nerves while presenting or answering questions. Again, this is one of the benefits of embedding the Culminating Project into a course, because you have a pre-made cohort of peers to support the candidates. Now I'm going to take a pause here, and I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to invite Maria to go ahead and share her screen and continue to the second portion of this presentation.
Hopefully you're hearing me as well as seeing my screen in slideshow mode. Yes?
Yes.
All right. Okay. And let's see. Here we go. Okay, so the next section is really talking, starts out with talking about how we can support the candidate for the interview. So prior to the presentation and interview, what are some things that we can do to support the candidate? And we've listed a few questions that might be answered or might be asked during that question and answer period, that exchange between the panel member and the student. Clearly, those questions are not known. We do not know what questions the assessor is going to be asking, but these are just some anticipated questions that you might sort of be able to share with the student ahead of time as they prepare for their presentation. I specifically love the last three. Why did you choose this topic? What was interesting and surprising to you as you were doing your research? And is this topic something that you might want to follow up in the future? Again, as a panel member, those would be questions that I would appreciate asking and hearing the answer to. We always remind the student that the questions will not be a yes or no question. They'll be open-ended, and also encourage the student to, as they listen to the question, perhaps actually just grab either the verb tense or the vocabulary from the question and use that in their answer. That's a good strategy. Also remind the students that the panel member, the assessor, may provide a little bit of the language, target language support during the interview. Naturally, they're going to be a sympathetic listener, and they may just make sure that they're smiling, that they're communicating with the student in a conversational setting, just to put the student at ease. A quick reminder to students, if they're nervous about their presentation, is to maybe pause briefly to make sure they reflect on the process, to be sure to ask for something to be repeated if they need to ask for something to be repeated. And also, something can be restated. You and I do that even in English as we communicate with each other. Ask for some clarification. And also be sure to correct themselves. If they catch themselves in an error, go ahead and correct and continue on. The reminding the student that if per chance they don't happen to achieve the required proficiency, or they're not satisfied with their performance, they would like to redo, there is an opportunity for them to be able to redo their presentation. And so we don't really capitalize on that, and we don't encourage that, but that is an opportunity that the student has that we should provide the student. Again, some ways to cope with nervousness: taking deep breaths, using some positive affirmations, visualizing a positive result, focusing a little bit beyond the panel and on the spot, where it's not as one-on-one with the panel, eyeball to eyeball. And I love being able to encourage the student to invite a friend or another SEAL candidate peer to just be present in their presentation. A lot of times that just provides that extra support and that extra support that the student needs, just to know that there is somebody there that is encouraging and cheering them on. Sometimes I see teachers in the presentation if the student is allowing for an audience, and it's so fun to see just the nodding and the positive affirmation from a teacher. The rubrics are available to us, and these are NYSSB approved rubrics. I have a little bit of an echo, Candy, that just came in. I don't know if that's from
Yes, I'm
somebody.
trying to identify it. Elizabeth Collins, if you're joining us, would you please mute?
Thank you. And so the rubrics are available to you. OBWL, our NYSSB office, has those rubrics available. They're available in multiple places on our website. And for our consortia, and we have several districts that belong to consortias across the state. We have them in Mid-State Auburn. We have right now 7 of our BOCES have a consortium. And so I always encourage, if you're on the call and you're part of that group, you know that I always encourage that the rubric that we would be using would be the NYSSB rubric. But you can create, if you have a consortium and you have a consortium rubric that you've created, you certainly can use that. You can certainly develop your own. Just remember that if you are using something other than the NYSSB created rubric, you do have to get that approved so that it does meet the rigor. Again, our languages are categorized in 3 different ways. You have the category 1, 2 languages. These are languages that are closer to the English language, and so might have some cognates, are potentially a little bit easier for the student to to use and to show proficiency in. Category 3, 4, they're again a little bit more difficult. And of course, we have the category for our classical languages as well. These are also all available on and individually available on our site. And just a reminder that for category 1, 2 languages, the intermediate high is the proficiency level required on all modalities and all modes of communication. And the intermediate mid, of course, follows, being that those are a little bit harder languages for the student. And the classical languages, as you know, the classical languages have their own grouping because of the fact that their presentation would be different. All 3 modes of communication need to be addressed, the interpretive, the interpersonal, and presentational. The interpretive is the mode of communication that the student is more likely to be using while they're doing their research, while they're analyzing authentic texts in order to put together their culminating project. And the interpersonal is, of course, the exchange that happens after that presentation that is done of the culminating project. Presentational is the monologue presentation as far as the speaking. And also, of course, there is a written presentation, and that's the actual culminating project itself. And here we show how they are demonstrated clearly in the project. They should be all included. One of the things that I really enjoy seeing is just this constant continuum of students using the target language materials to interpret and to create their project, and then being able to present it in the target language, and then being able to have that interpersonal exchange with the panel members and have them use that to demonstrate their proficiency in the target language. I also enjoy seeing anytime that I'm in a classroom, visiting a classroom, I love seeing the rubrics posted, seeing the rubrics used. Candy mentioned students can put together their project at any time during their high school career. And it is nice for students, all students, to just have that knowledge of what the modes of communication are, and to use them, whether it would be for the culminating project for SEAL or for just any project that they're creating. It's just good practice to have those involved. The interpretive communication is done and usually assessed prior to the student bringing in their project to present. So usually that's the assessment that's being done by either the mentor, the project advisor, or the teacher of the student, to make sure that that is included and completed in there. And it does take in some reading, some viewing, some listening, all in the authentic materials, of course, in the target language. Again, we would make sure that this would be pretty well checked throughout the creation of the project and evaluated then. The presentational communication, you have presentational speaking. That's the monologue that the student is going to be doing during their project presentation. And then their presentational writing is obviously the beautiful culminating project. There will be some writing potentially during that is shown and showcased during the presentation, but most of the presentational writing is going to be done ahead of time by the student. Again, the mode that is going to be super important for that assessment of the proficiency is that interpersonal mode. And that is happening when the student is being evaluated by the panel members and going through that interview. The students must demonstrate that required level of proficiency in all of the three modes. So even the mode that's being assessed, the interpretive mode, that's potentially being assessed prior, and the presentational writing, that should all have the required level of proficiency for that category language. Our rubrics are, again, everywhere on our website. They're listed in multiple ways, and I encourage you to use them, to dissect them with your students, even if they're not SEAL candidates, but particularly if they're SEAL candidates, make sure that they get them early and that they know what it is that their project needs to contain and the level of proficiency that needs to be attained in order for them to receive those 2 points. There are 2 webinars that will be offered upcoming regarding the use of the rubrics, February 28th, and also the webinar March 20th for training panelists. So it's just as important to train the panelist as it is to train the student. The student, quite often we know that because we have the student all year long, and we have opportunities to touch base with the student. Their project advisor is continually looking at the timeline. The panelists sometimes get a little bit left out, and I encourage you, we've learned this from all of our consortia. I encourage you to calibrate, to train your panelists as to what the rubric means if they aren't already familiar with the rubric. And some speakers that you're going to have to use may not be fully familiar, may not navigate that rubric as you and I might in a classroom. And so it would be important to train them on that, and also just even on just some really good things about what should go on, how the treatment of the student, just the reminders to the panelist about that what would go on for that student presentation, just to ensure student success and a good experience for everyone. Immediately following the presentation, the students will, of course, grab their belongings and leave the room. And then it is up to the panelists to have a short conversation and come to consensus about what how the presentation fared for the proficiency level required. In our case, what I usually suggest to all of our teams is each student has a folder. Inside that folder, of course, for the purpose of the panel members, there are copies of the rubric. On those copies, there is a space for the panelists to be able to jot some notes and to be able to if especially they don't come to consensus, they'll be able to put down if it's what the level that is determined. But if they don't come to consensus, it is super important. Just a few little notes about why, because we then pick up those folders and at a later time look at that. And if we do have to schedule the student for another presentation, it is so nice to have those comments from the panelists. And they're often hard to retrieve later on after several other students have gone through the process with them. So I would encourage that. I also always encourage that if you see something nice, something especially really, really beautiful about that presentation, or the way it was presented, the language that was used, even in the target language, the mannerisms, whatever you can put down that you just really, truly appreciated and can be complimentary to the student. And often that is a really cool thing to be able to share with the student, as well as the SEAL coordinator and sort of everyone that's been in the background supporting the student, to just hear those beautiful accolades. I think we always like to share those. But specifically, if there was a challenge, if there was no consensus, please make sure that there is a comment regarding that. Other than that, the opportunity to just check off saying that the student met criteria. The SEAL coordinator should really, or someone, the project advisor, whoever is really connected with the student throughout this process, should let them know that they can repeat this presentation should they want to. Some students choose not to, but other students really do appreciate the opportunity. So bird's eye view, the student comes in, does their presentation, the speaking part of their presentational mode. The panelist then asks those all-important questions. They might take turns asking a question, a round of questions from each one, and then they take the time to sort of get together and for those few brief moments and discuss the evidence that they have and come to consensus as to what the result of that presentation was. There are a huge amount, a plethora of resources that are found in our website. Candy has been absolutely wonderful at maintaining those and adding to them, and so many resources from so many people that have contributed. One of those is the guidance toolkit. I think my good friend Shauna is also on the call, and Shauna and Candy and I had a really good time putting this together for you. And these are modules that that really sort of spell out the project and the whole SEAL journey of the student. So and even the SEAL journey of the district, right, the school, because with the Getting Started module, it really goes back to I would love to do this in school, in our school. How do I present it to the Board of Ed and get this idea off the ground? And so that's what that Getting Started module is. And it goes all the way down to, Candy was gracious to put in even the logistics of completing that end of year form. So, which is so helpful to everyone that's trying to pull that together and order their seals. Our webinar series continue again. It's really wonderful to see the sort of the mastermind behind this, the fact that Candy would sort of create a timeline for all of us so that you have, as the process of SEAL is going on throughout the year, the school year, you're sort of getting these opportunities to learn about the things as they're coming up, about each one of the milestones as they're coming up. So January 24th, you have preparing for the visit, for those of you who have a visit coming up. And then on February 28th, using the SEAL rubric, which is wonderful, an opportunity to just really dig into what constitutes the required criteria and so forth, training the panelists, and of course then making sure that you have your paperwork in and that it doesn't return back to you for for a mistake. Our Seal of Biliteracy forum is also available to everyone, and these are monthly meetings, once a month for an hour, CTLE credit, and I love tuning into these. Sometimes I'm traveling, I'm just listening. At the times I'm able to have a more participating role in it, but this is certainly a great way for us to stay connected with a common folder with all of the resources. And so this I encourage you, if you're not part of this team, this particular forum, to please join. Again, asking for assistance. Our burns are all across the state. We have a good representation of SEAL candidates that are from across all of our schools across the state, and then SEAL coordinators that are also from the various regions. And so feel free to reach out to your regional RBURN and to get as much assistance as you would like, as many resources as you need. Whatever we don't know, we ask. We're pretty good network. Here's putting the face to each one of us that support those various Arborns, and we welcome your questions and we welcome learning with you. Um, the webinar handout, I was really, we put this together as far as the information that we felt you needed to be able to sort of have a digest of and retrieve after our webinar. We hope that it's helpful to you. From my part, I just listed a lot of things, and then Candy turned it into this this beautiful document, colorful document, and I'm very grateful for it, because here is a quick handout that you would have to just quickly either share with your colleagues, or to even just reference yourself as needed. Again, for more information, Candy and I are available. Candy's information and myself as well. My cell number, the 729-1719 number, that is my actual cell phone. So you got me. I usually have that around pretty much round the clock throughout the day. And if you send a quick text, or even just give a quick call, I'm happy to hear from you all. And we thank you for the opportunity to do this today. Here are our goals for today's session. I'm just going to load them for the sake of time, so that we hopefully would have some time to entertain some of your questions. But I think that hopefully we have given you not just a timeline of the process, but helping you to identify what the elements that are part of that culminating project, so you can assist your students. The duties of a project advisor, which a project advisor / mentor is so crucial to the process in keeping the student on their timeline. And again, presentations, how to support students through that presentation, where to find those rubrics, and the expectations for the panel and throughout that interview and afterwards, and all of the resources that are available for us, and where we'll reach out if you need additional assistance. I'm going to stop the share and send it back to Candy, and we'll entertain a question from you.